We are now live.
Okay, Soti everyone, and welcome to our online Dhamma group where we study together Buddhist texts. And we are joined by the Venerable Dhamma, who is living in Sri Lanka in the meditation center. So if you're interested in doing intensive meditation, you can check out the website sirimangalo.org and see what we have to offer. And everything is for free. No one will charge you. Today we will continue with studying the commentary of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta for 1 hour by the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And afterwards we will have another hour for discussion and a Q&A. Before we start, we will take together the 5 precepts. So we do that every week as a reminder for the basics of morality, to have a fruitful meditation, to be grounded in practicing the Buddha's teaching. And we do that also to prepare the mind for studying the teachings. And we take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha because it's an ancient tradition and it's a formal way to say that you are accepting the Buddha, his teachings, and his students, or the enlightened ones who have realized them. Everyone is welcome to take them. Even if you have already taken them, it's a good reminder for repetition. Is there someone in the Discord who would like to lead the recitation today?
I would like to.
Okay, thank you. You can start, Andrew, when you're ready.
Can you... Oh, okay. Aham bante tisranena saha pancha silani yachami. Dutiyampi aham bante tisranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tatiyampi aham bante tisranena saha pancha silani yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddham saranam gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sangham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sangam Saranam Gacchami.
Isaranagammanang nititang.
Amanabante.
Parnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinatana Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamasu Yachara Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya Majja Pamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani sīlena sugating yanti, sīlena bhoga sampada, sīlena nibbutiṃ yanti, tasmā sīlaṃ visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
We will now continue with the study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary. And before we start, please send us a request for the reading group. And if you want to be part of the reading group, you just have to have done at least the at-home course. And we read in the alphabetical order. There's a list in the chat. We read 2 paragraphs usually. And please take your time when reading and take a pause in between each paragraph. So there's time for questions or Venerable Tadamo can explain a passage. So we are currently on page 183 of the PDF, 173 of the book, the physical copy. And I marked the paragraph in red. This we will start with as for the Blessed One. And the next reader for today would be, the first reader would be Lara. You can go ahead. Thank you.
As for the Blessed One, having fully accomplished the path of insight, he had seen the best, the noblest bliss of all, Nibbana. By virtue of attaining the knowledge of arahantship, and having seen the foremost and the noblest Nibbana, he saw in the aggregates of attachment only dreadful pain and suffering. This perception came to him not after hearing about it from others, nor from the practices he learned from the recluses Alara and Udaka. This came about by direct personal knowledge after developing the Noble Eightfold Path. That is why he declared, concerning things not heard before, there arose in me vision, etc.
All right, so to recap, we are most of the way through the sutta in the book already. The discourse is the first discourse, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, given by the Buddha to the 5 ascetics in the deer park in Isipatana. And the main bulk of the sutta is the Four Noble Truths. We've gone through a description of what are the Four Noble Truths and Mahasi Sayadaw's explanation in detail about each of the Four Noble Truths. And now he's describing the 12 spokes of the wheel. If you remember from last week, I explained that he's going to call these the 12 spokes of the wheel, which is the Four Noble Truths, each with 3 parts, which is the truth of it, the task to be done in regards to the truth, and the knowledge that that task has been completed. And once you have that knowledge that that task has been completed, you've completed all 3, you have become fulfilled in all 3 parts of that truth. And it actually happens all at the same time. All the Four Noble Truths are accomplished at the same time. But what's important is, besides understanding each of the truths, is the understanding of what is the task to be done, because it really changes the way you look not only at the world, but at meditation in general, or meditation as well. Because you're not trying to, for example, escape suffering. There's an actual task to be done, and it's not escape. It's not run away from suffering or try to fix it or try to remove it. But so far, he's quoted the first spoke of the 12 spokes. So meaning the first part of the First Noble Truth, which is the truth of it. And now he's talking about not only that the Buddha explains what is that this was the truth. He points out that, or he remarks that this is something that was not known before. Pube anano sutesu dhammesu. So this knowledge, this vision, this profound insight into reality came not from hearing from someone else. Hearing from someone else, or it's not something anyone had ever heard about in the world. It's something that he arrived upon on his own, through his own investigation of reality.
With these words, he professed also that he had indeed become a fully enlightened one, a Samma Sambuddha, who had sought and found the truth by virtue of personal realization and direct knowledge, unaided by instructions or guidance from any source. Such an open profession was indeed necessary. In those days, self mortifications such as abstaining from taking food, etc., practiced by Nighanta ascetics, was greatly esteemed as a holy and noble practice. The group of 5 ascetics themselves were earlier under the impression that it was so. Thus, only when the Blessed One openly declared that he had discovered the practice and knowledge, not through hearing from others, nor through speculation and logical reasoning, but by his own realization, by personal experience and direct knowledge, his audience became convinced of his having gained supreme enlightenment as having become a true Buddha.
It's interesting thinking about it. The first noble truth, even the second noble truth, I'm not sure how intellectually novel they would be. Like, obviously, the first noble truth, we've gone over this, how essential it is and how profound it is to actually see it, but it's not really a profound intellectual teaching. So it's interesting to say that when we're talking about the first noble truth, that hearing this would have given them confidence. Oh, this is definitely something new or something special, because it's mostly stuff that we've heard, or they would have heard. That old age is suffering, death is suffering, sickness is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, despair. I mean, this is not new. The Buddha isn't saying these things to reveal something that was hidden, where people say, "Oh, old age is suffering. I never thought of that. Obviously, that's not the case, right? And the second noble truth, that craving is the cause of suffering, was pretty well established. Not in the way that the Buddha taught it, and also especially not in regards to what is to be done. Well, that's not even really fair. But the second noble truth was a large part of why these ascetics were torturing themselves. They believed that craving was the problem. And so they did whatever they could to burn up the craving, to in a way, make you comfortable with pain and suffering, things that you could never enjoy. Do whatever you can in such a way that you will not enjoy it. Because if you do that, enjoyment, desire won't arise. You hurt yourself, but you don't like that, so liking doesn't arise. Well, that's good. You've avoided liking, right? That was a big part of why they tortured themselves, as I understand. So it was kind of known. The profundity of the first part of the sutta in that regard was much more novel, much more of a revelation, to think that torturing yourself is also useless. Right? When the Buddha talks about the middle way, this would have been something new to them. They would be skeptical about it because this is what they based their doctrine on, as he says. But I think the real shift, I think, is much more likely to come when you talk about the second part of each of the truth, which is the duty. And I've been talking about this for several weeks now, how it's not what you think. That yes, people will say suffering is this is suffering, that is suffering, and this is important, but they would never think to actually learn about it, to actually study it. They always think to change it. The idea is do what you can to get rid of it. That's the real, I think, profound shift, where the Buddha teaches to understand suffering, to fully understand it. And also with the fourth noble truth, I think especially, the third noble truth is pretty, I mean, intellectually speaking, it's quite obvious, with the cessation of craving, there's the cessation of suffering. I mean, that's not incredibly obvious, but to these guys, it would have been the logical conclusion, because they were under the impression that craving and desire was bad. And so the cessation of craving comes the cessation of suffering. But the fourth noble truth would have been quite novel. The Eightfold Noble Path would have been something very new, to be able to lay it out so clearly. I was also thinking maybe in the first noble truth, the five aggregates. It's interesting that the Buddha doesn't explain what are the five aggregates, because I was always under the impression that that was something uniquely Buddhist. But if he didn't explain them, then it means that the five ascetics knew what the five aggregates were. So it may very well have been something that was common knowledge outside of the Buddha's teaching. What are the five aggregates? It may not have been a uniquely Buddhist teaching. I'm not sure. It may also be that he did explain it and it's just not recorded in the sutta. It's another potential. Another thing is, I think, not the words that the Buddha said, but the way that he said them. Because you can't speak like a Buddha. You can't have the supreme and perfect confidence in what you're saying when you say these things that a Buddha would have. Now, when the Buddha said these things, it would be quite different from an ordinary person just repeating them or talking about them intellectually. When the Buddha said it, it really meant something. And that would have had a strong impression on them.
Ante, would the Bodhisattva's earlier teachers, Alara and Udaka, also teaching him austere practices as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like it. Doesn't sound like it. You know, if you learn about the Upanishads, so the Upanishads that the Western world was introduced to are apparently highly curated and a bit misleading. So these Western scholars gathered and collected what they called the Upanishads, which my understanding, or what I was taught in university, were actually far more diverse and less of a coherent whole than they were presented to the Western audience. It was kind of forced to be this one thing. But why I'm bringing this up is because it seems that in the time of the Buddha, the Upanishads were reflective of the sorts of teachings that were around in the time just before the Buddha arose, were quite diverse. So it's quite likely that there were many different practices. I mean, we see that with the 6 teachers who were mentioned by the Buddha several times, who taught very different things. And so it's not likely that all of them were torturing themselves. It was the Nigantas, the Jayans were I think quite big on self-torture. And they were quite popular.
Thank you, Bante.
I think it's quite likely that the 2 teachers of the Buddha were among the best and the most pure at the time, and probably weren't devoted to any kind of useless self-torture. They were more like gurus in the classical sense, like Hindu gurus who taught meditation, taught how to calm the mind, how to focus the mind. It's just that without the insight into reality, they weren't able to pay attention. They weren't able to apply that to the actual experiences. They weren't able to break through that samatha vipassana barrier, or the conceptual and ultimate reality barrier.
Yes, and I assume that even to practice the immaterial jhanas, you need some preliminary restraint or something, or
I think you even need right view. You need basic right view. You have to believe in karma. You have
exactly.
to, yeah, you have to have that.
Yeah, thank you.
To gain direct intuitive knowledge without outside assistance is the exclusive domain of enlightened Buddhas and Pacceka Buddhas. The disciples of the Blessed One reached such stages of realization and knowledge only by listening to the teachings of the Buddha and cultivating them through practice. Nowadays, too, such knowledge, if desired, may be acquired by developing them through practice in accordance with the teachings enshrined in the teachings such as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. By practicing as taught in these discourses, the aggregates of attachment will be seen as they truly are, mere suffering and pain. The Buddha's proclamation was intended also to provoke the group of 5 ascetics to make the effort to see the true nature of the aggregates of attachment.
Yeah, that's true. The impactful part of the statement, I think, is much more the second part, jnanang udapadi, anya udapadi, vijja udapadi, aloko udapadi, where the Buddha says, yes, this is the truth, and you know that these things are suffering. You have you have the sense, but this is something deeper that the Buddha understood for himself. Because the truth is, we don't get it. We don't understand suffering. Anyone will tell you old age is suffering, but they don't understand that because they still run around acting as though they're going to live forever. They don't have any sense that they have to be ready for old age and that old age is inevitable. And people know that death is suffering, but do we act like that's an important aspect of our life? Nobody acts like that, saying, oh yeah, this is a big deal. I should be ready for it, right? If we really understood that old age, sickness, death are suffering and all these other things are suffering, we wouldn't be so negligent and running around chasing after things that and acting as though this wasn't on the horizon for us. And furthermore, the depth of understanding is such a profound experience. I mean, it's the First Noble Truth. Seeing the First Noble Truth is what leads to freedom, leads to purity. So he's not talking about something intellectual. He said, I saw this for myself. It's exactly what Mahasi Sayadaw says here. It's such a profound thing to tell people that you can learn these things. You can observe reality and see these things. I mean, it seems so simple. It seems so obvious. I guess, especially for someone, for us who are in the Buddhasasana and are familiar with all of this, it seems, but it's not obvious. And remember what it was like before you learned anything about the Buddha's teaching, before you started to practice the Buddha's teaching, how you had no concept that you could actually learn these things, that you could actually observe reality and understand the truth of suffering, understand the nature of why we suffer. We have this is why all these theories and practices arise, trying to fix the problem of suffering, that have no hope of ever succeeding, because they don't address the underlying mechanics of the problem. There's no awareness, there's no understanding of what's actually happening in the moment, right? So people will say the brain, you have to fix the brain, so you take medication and that fixes suffering. Or there's other things like you distract your mind, or they have these strategies, programs that you can undertake. Some of them actually have reasonable results, but none of them are anywhere near this so obviously correct practice of just observing and facing experience and straightening your mind out in regards to actual experience, to see the experience, the real thing, not just intellectually, this is what's happening in your brain, or this is your problem, or this is the strategy, but actually this is what's happening right now, and you can confirm that for yourself.
Bande, may I please ask a couple of questions? So,
Sure.
in this, the first, the wheel of Dhamma, is there any way that the Lord Buddha might have mentioned eka, because I have recited many times, but I can't remember. So eka, the way I understand from Bande Usila Nanda is the only way to to be free from suffering is the practice of vipassana. So the way to understand the true nature of suffering is this is the only way. So that's one question, if my understanding is correct. And also when one practices this, the vipassana mindfulness, and then one becomes very different view of the conventional world, even in the life of daily practices, resolving issues, then you become very different from, you see problems in a very different way. Is it also normal, Bandy? Thank you, Bandy.
Well, he doesn't explicitly talk about it being the only way, but he does. I mean, it's implicit because he says before becoming accomplished in the 12 spokes of the wheel, I didn't call myself a Buddha, but after I understood or had completed all of these 12 spokes, then I said I was a Buddha. Basically saying this is it. This is what leads one to become enlightened. This is it's basically the only way. You couldn't interpret it any other way, really. I suppose you could. You could say, well, this is how he became a Buddha. And there could be other ways. I mean, it's just an intellectual exercise. So it's not explicit, but it's very implicit. And of course, it's explained elsewhere. There's one place where the Buddha said, "Esewa mago natanyo asanasa visuddhya," referring to the Eightfold Noble Path. Esewa mago, this indeed is the path, natanyo, there is no other, for the purification of view, or the purification of vision, dasana. Dasana, which is pasana, which is vipassana, it's the same word. And of course, in the Satipatthana Sutta, he says, Ekayanoyam bhikkhave magos is another place. But for your second question, I mean, absolutely, through the practice, you're going to start to see things differently. You start to see things less as problems. It's not even just that you'll look at problems differently. You'll stop seeing them as problems. You may be able to describe them that way, but that's not how they'll appear. They'll appear as experiences. This isn't a problem. This is just an experience, or a series of experiences.
Thank you, Bandy. Thank you.
In the Buddha's declaration mentioned above, the development of extraordinary knowledge was described as vision arose, knowledge arose, wisdom arose, penetrative insight arose, light arose. 5 descriptions given for a single form of knowledge. The Sangyutta commentary states, vision, knowledge, etc. are synonyms meaning the same thing, knowledge. Because of the faculty of seeing, knowledge is termed vision. Because of the faculty of knowing, it is termed knowledge. Because of analyzing in several ways, it is termed wisdom. Because of penetrating, it is termed penetrative insight. Because of shedding light, it is termed illumination.
Yeah, this is a pattern you see. This is why vipassana Vipassana is, the practice is described as vipassana, seeing clearly. It's something the Buddha emphasizes, obviously, because, I mean, it's not the only reason, but obviously there's this problem where knowledge is equated with something intellectual. You think about it, you believe, you cultivate, or you form in your mind this view, and then you say, I believe this and this and this, based on what you've formed or formulated in your mind. So again and again, the Buddha says, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, you actually see it. I mean, it's important to understand this what he's saying here. He's saying you experience it for yourself. He's not saying see with the eye, and the light there is not actual sitting in meditation and you see bright colors or bright lights or colors or something. This is just the metaphorical language the Buddha is using to remind us that this knowledge is hands-on. It's something through direct realization. And just, if it's not completely clear, so again, there are 12 spokes, meaning each of the Four Noble Truths has the truth of it, the duty, and the knowledge that the duty has been performed. And the Buddha, in this part of the sutta, the Buddha recites, or he lays out each of these 12 things, and it's basically a repetition. So he says, this is the truth of suffering, and in regards to that truth of suffering, vision arose, knowledge arose, wisdom arose. And then he repeats that for the task to be done. This truth of suffering is to be fully understood. In regards to that, vision arose, knowledge arose. And so if you chant the sutta, it's just a repetition for each of the 12. And one reason for this, as I think I mentioned before, is as a rhetorical tool. Sorry, not just in regards to repeating for each one, but in regards to there being similes, as he describes in this paragraph, is that you don't just say knowledge arose. You describe it like as though you're walking around it and you're describing this side of the object, that side of this big object, and you want to describe it. You describe different aspects of it to kind of give a 3D description of the object. You give different facets of it. And this is a reason and of the value that the Buddha puts into use all throughout his teachings in repeating the same thing using different words, different language. So you say it one way, you say it another way. It's impactful to the audience, especially someone who is so meditative, an audience so meditative as these 5 ascetics, who would be sitting, contemplating, and reacting, and allowing these words to change and to mold their views and their understanding of at least what the Buddha was saying.
The Patisambheda Magga explains these terms similarly. The Pali word chaku conveys the idea of seeing, hence vision. Various Pali words are empowered for the purpose of conveying the desired meaning or concept to different audiences. The commentary explains. Thus, to describe the knowledge that sees clearly as with the physical eye, it is termed vision. To give an illustration, a man who has been blind for several years regains his eyesight through application of right medicine or operation by an eye specialist. He did not see anything before treatment. Now he sees everything very clearly. Likewise, before the meditator has developed insight knowledge or path knowledge, he or she was living under the delusion that the 5 aggregates of attachment which embody suffering are good and pleasant. However, by constant noting at the moment of seeing, hearing, etc., insight becomes strengthened, and the meditator realizes clearly that the phenomena of seeing, hearing, etc., otherwise known as the aggregates of attachment, are really dreadful suffering because of their nature of incessant arising and perishing. It is like gaining eyesight after being blind. With the development of path knowledge, his realization of the true nature of suffering will be even sharper. Thus, because it sees clearly as if by the eye, it is called vision. With regard to knowledge aroused, jnanang udapadi, the Pali term jnana connotes knowing, hence knowledge. As to wisdom arose, panya udapadi, the Pati Sambhita Magga states that panya connotes knowing analytically in various ways. In connection with insight meditation, while noting rising, falling, etc., mind and matter are known separately as stiff movement and knowing mind. The uninitiated cannot know this distinction by personal experience.
Yes, this is important. There are many views out there regarding body and mind. Dualism, idealism, physicalism, and beliefs, and their reasoned beliefs based on this or that reasoning or observation. But some of them simply miss the mark. Others are simply overcomplicating something. I mean, obviously only through actual application of mind to the nature of experience can you say what there is. But there's, of course, a large portion of humanity that has the idea that personal experience is unreliable, that reality has nothing to do with actual experience. So when they talk about reality, they're talking about something that they have no direct knowledge of. It's something hinted at by observations, or it's hinted at by rigorously controlled observations, where not only did I experience it, but 1,000 other people experienced the same thing, something like that. Or these machines that are not subject to human bias experience the same thing. We record these experiences. This is, modern science uses machines to record observations, so you know that you're not being tainted by your own biases or imperfections or so on. And so when they cultivate views or formulate views about reality, about body and mind, they do so completely by intellectual conjecture or intellectual conclusions. And it's not so much that that's wrong or that it's right or wrong. It's not so much about being right or wrong, it's that it's useless from the perspective of fixing the problem, let's say, or freeing oneself from suffering. Because the mind doesn't know it. And since the mind doesn't know that in the way of actually verifying it and being clear based on seeing it again and again and again in the same way, or becoming so clearly familiar with reality that you are able to verify that that's the nature of reality. Without that, you don't have the power of mind, the power of truth, the power of confidence to make the decision to let go. And so the mind still is clinging. But just think how much of this is, how much discourse there is around body and mind and the nature of experience or the nature of consciousness. Not in everyday conversation, but among philosophers, among scientists. It's a big deal. And all you have to do is just pay attention. I mean, the real key of the Buddha's teaching is how to pay attention. That's why we put so much emphasis on mindfulness. It's not so much that you can. I mean, if you said you can learn about reality, and 10 different people would interpret that in 10 different ways. Oh yes, well I do this to understand reality. But they end up not actually touching actual experience. The Buddha actually providing a path or a practice, techniques, and laying it out in such a clear manner. It's not really anything mysterious or even surprising. It's just nobody could do that, not because it was something foreign or mysterious or hard to find. It's that the minds are so polluted that something so obvious, really so obvious, you're unable to see. The Dhamma is incredibly obvious. It's right there in front of us. The truth is right there. And we can't see it. It's not because it's hidden. It's not because it's deeply esoteric or anything. It's that our minds are so polluted that we make more of things than they are. We distort things. We are completely ignoring things right in front of us. That's really all it is. So in a way, the Buddha's teaching sounds very obvious. And it is because reality is obvious. An enlightened person looks and says, how could you, they know why you can't see that, but it's just remarkable that people can't see this.
The meditator can also differentiate the cause from the effect. He or she knows every fresh arising distinct from its vanishing. He or she knows that because of incessant arising and perishing, the aggregates are impermanent and dreadful suffering, and that they arise and perish of their own accord, not subject to anyone's control. He or she knows clearly that they are not self, but insubstantial. This is not a vague, indistinct knowledge, just a glimmer of understanding, but a distinct, clear, definite comprehension, as if observed in the palm of one's hand. Such knowledge is described as knowing analytically in various ways, hence wisdom. In penetrative insight arose. Vija udapadi. The word vija means penetration. It should not be confused with the word for a person accomplished in the mantras, vijadahra, who is described in books as having the power of flying through space. Here, vija denotes not the person, but the penetrative faculty, hence penetrative insight. Penetrative insight is a subtle and profound state. Here, I must relate an incident that happened in about 1938. During a discussion I had with the presiding Sayadaw of our village monastery, I happened to inform him that wisdom arose while taking note of the phenomenon of arising and perishing at the moment of its occurrence. The Sayadaw could not accept this kind of cognition as wisdom, panya. He maintained that wisdom is that which is penetrative. Only knowing penetratingly is wisdom. When asked how one should bring about knowing penetratingly, he hesitated for some time and then pronounced, well, knowing penetratingly is knowing penetratingly. Knowing penetratingly is derived from the Pali word patiyata, penetrating through. It is akin to sambodhaya. In order to know penetratingly, as explained in part 2 of my discourse, hidden by a screen or a wall, objects cannot be seen. However, when a hole is made in the screen or a window in the wall is opened, objects become visible through these openings. Likewise, this knowledge penetrates through the veil of delusion. When concealed by delusion, what is seen, heard, etc., is not known as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. It is believed to be permanent, pleasant, and a self, being deceived by ignorance and delusion. When insight matures, clear knowledge arises as if the veil of delusion has been pierced. Such cognition is called knowing penetratingly. The Blessed One declared that such penetrative insight has arisen in him.
I think the meaning behind this story that he tells, I think the implication is it's something that's familiar within monastic circles, where, especially with monks who have, well, been ordained a long time, have studied reasonably well, but are just very familiar with the ideas behind, well, the ideas presented by the Buddha's teaching, ideas like pativeda, like realization of the truth. But because they've never put any effort into the practice of mindfulness, and of course there are many monks who have, well, there are monks who have never seriously applied themselves to meditation at all, but there are of course many who have never undertaken vipassana and only practiced samatha quite diligently. Because they've never had that direct interaction with reality, these ideas of realization take on a larger meaning. They become meaningful. And so this Sayadaw, it sounds like, was struggling with that, where he had it described to him very simply. Something that if you look at the Buddha's teaching, it's completely accurate. Of course, when you pay attention to arising and ceasing of phenomenon, insight arises. You can become enlightened just watching your stomach rise and fall. But it sounds almost sacrilegious to one of these, to a person like this who has put these ideas up on a pedestal, and because it's wrong, he's not able to actually describe what he means, what his problem is with what the Mahasi Sayadaw is saying. But he knows something, or he feels that something's like it isn't that simple. This is a big deal. You come across this among Buddhists who are not really familiar with the deeper teachings of vipassana. The idea of nibbana, or the idea of insight, it just seems like something that the gods, it's almost as if supernatural beings are able to, like, as though it's something that is confined to the realm of angels. It's something that human beings are never able to realize. This man, I think I mentioned, I met a man in Thailand, and he asked me why I ordained, and I think I said something like, in order to become an arahant, or at least I said in order to reach nibbana. No, I said because I want to realize nibbana. And he was shocked, and he said, "Oh, you Western," or maybe he laughed, I can't remember, but he said, "Oh, you foreigners, you're reaching for the moon all the time." He said, "Human beings can't realize nibbana." That's you foreigners are always reaching for the moon. And I said, "Well, human beings did land on the moon, you know." And he said, "Oh, no, that was all faked." Conversation kind of ended there. I just sort of walked away. But there is this problem where there's no sense that among people who have been taught this sort of thing their whole lives, there's no sense that you can actually just reach it by, for example, watching your stomach. Lumpo Chodok makes an example talking about this very point. He says, there was a monk who became enlightened by looking at his feces. He turned around after he'd gone to the toilet, and he saw maggots on the in the hole. They would just dig a hole. It was a very crude and simple toilet, and he saw maggots and became enlightened as a result of the strength of mind that came from observing the color of the maggots. I was able to apply that to cultivate vipassana. But he's saying that it's not something that is only confined. Mindfulness is not something that should be only confined to like a temple or sitting in front of the Buddha, or to monks or something like that. Practice of the Buddha's teaching is very mundane. It's very much about the mundane.
Bente, I have a question. To the view that humans, mundane humans, can't get further in the path, is that not directly against the teaching that we're reading? I mean, isn't that why the Buddha taught? So how is it? So the view that only the gods can achieve enlightenment, that's actually against the heart of the teaching, is it not?
Well, it's not taught per se, but it's, when something is taught in a religious way, especially, imagine you go to a monastery, you're a young person in a Buddhist country, and you go to the monastery, and there's this weight and this pomp and ceremony and this religiousness to it, or it's not religiousness, but this kind of the formality to it all, where everything is done and talked about in such a high way. There's all this bowing down, there's chanting, there's lighting candles and incense and offering flowers. And the monks who are teaching may very well be describing the Buddha's teaching, but they're not teaching it the way Mahasi Sayadaw does, where you do this and this and this, and this is how you actually realize it. They're saying things and they're focusing on how you as a religious person can appreciate these things and revere them, because they themselves have never practiced. So when you have this feedback loop where teachers are not actually practicing, and so the students never learn the connection between the teachings and the practice, everything just takes on this weight to it. And so it's not that anyone ever says you can't realize these things. It's just a shock to think that you could do something so simple to realize these things, when in your mind they have such a weight to them. They have such a profound, they're up on a pedestal. That's the best way of describing it. You put something up on a pedestal means you fail to see it in its bare and ordinary nature. So the idea that you could look at look in the toilet and become enlightened. It's just kind of, it's as though you're insulting this very, very important thing.
Thank you.
Bandy, may I please ask one more question, just to add on to what the current discussions about humans being able to become can become an arahant. Growing up in my culture, there is a lot of saying in the lay people's community that, if you are a female, I don't mean to bring in the whole gender issue, but there's a saying that because for a female to be able to reach arahant or realize nibbana is not necessarily possible in this life. But when I listen to Mahasi Sayadaw's Dhamma's talks, many years later, he never ever mentioned about men and women, and he often mentions that meditators, he always encourages meditators, to always, do them practice, and then there's you can reach, you can realize nibbana if you follow the path properly. But again, growing up as a normal, lay person, it's that has always, makes me wonder, no matter how hard I try, will I still be able to reach where I want to reach in terms of, enlightenment? So is there any advice on this, Bande? Thank you.
We should note those feelings, but yeah, I think if you talk to... So one thing I've noticed among monks, and surprisingly this isn't confined just to monks from Buddhist countries, it's also something I've heard from Western monks. And it's funny because as a monk myself, they don't feel afraid to admit these beliefs or views, but it is quite common to hear them say that women have special problems. Actually, that's a direct quote, not from a monk, but from my first meditation teacher, who said women have special problems. Those were I think the actual words he used. He wasn't a monk. But I've heard from monks saying women, it's basically that sort of thing. I've heard it from Western monks, that the Buddha knew that women had special problems and this sort of thing. But you don't see it anywhere in the Buddha's teaching. And so I wanted to say that if you talk to any good monk, they would tell you, no, the Buddha never taught such a thing. But I'm not sure that's true. I think many monks do have this bias, do have this negative opinion of women in general. But I think what you could say is that throughout history that we have recorded, being a woman is generally a disadvantage. Not by the nature of it, but completely because of how it has been, I guess, agreed upon. I mean, how societies have evolved. So it's not universal, but in many, let's say, many cultures, I would say the majority of cultures throughout history, women have been put at a disadvantage. They've been looked down upon. They've been given this narrative that they're inferior. And they just haven't had a fair shot of it. Men have always had the upper hand and have always strived to maintain that sense of superiority. But the Buddha said, some women are better than some men, which doesn't sound all that profound, but imagine saying that at the time. I mean, if you know anything about the time when the Buddha grew up, to say that some women are superior, to basically say that gender has nothing to do with it. I mean, that's basically what that statement says, that gender doesn't play a part, doesn't even play a part in whether you're better or worse. The problem is that women have internalized misogyny. So what that means is women have the sense, I mean, they've been taught their whole lives that they're inferior, and so they have that sense in many cultures. Not all. I mean, Edith's mentioned a few times that in her culture she's never encountered that. But or something like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but she has mentioned that she's never felt like that, so, to something to that extent. So there is, of course, better examples, but it is a problem when you've had this sense. It does make it more difficult. There are many things that can affect your conviction, your confidence in the practice. So what you have sounds like a lack of confidence, or a deficiency in confidence because of this cultural or social conditioning. You're being told that it's futile, that as a woman you're inferior, that you're unable to become enlightened, etc., etc.
Oh, thank you, Benny.
And that can have an actual.
Sorry.
But before I let you, I just wanted to say one last thing is, it can also work the other way. I mean, men can often have a very difficult time practicing because they're overconfident and they're over self-assured. Men having this, I mean, it's been described that women feel like objects and men feel like subjects. So a man is always taught about how to interact with the world, whereas a woman is always taught how to present herself to the world, right? How to present herself to the people observing her. I mean, this is a gross generalization, but this is a problem with the imbalance. And it's not necessarily true that, I mean, it doesn't follow immediately that one is better than the other.
Thank you, Bendy. So I don't mean to be disrespectful to the culture that I grew up. I was very, very lucky enough to grow up in a family that doesn't have any favoritism towards men or women or gender. So for that, I've been very, very lucky. In general, also, men and women, there's not a lot of preferences as much as I know in general context. However, only when it comes to this Buddhism that that's how I have witnessed and I heard, and then also put into the context. There's no gender issue, but you are a Buddhist, you have to understand that for women we suffer more than men, and they would just use an example of women have to give birth to children and things like that. That's how we are put into context. Then now I can relate to what you have just explained. Andy, thank you so much.
Oh, if actually, I think Kiki made a very interesting point. I think religion, just a very, I don't mean to be presenting my views or anything, but religion has a very intimate tie to this gender role. Like, I mean, I've lived in the Middle East, I've lived in the Western world, and even in Asia. I grew up in Asia, but so all these cultures, regardless of whether socially there is a equity or not, religion is tied very intimately to a social and family structure. So I think a little bit of light in there.
Yeah, you have to wade through some of the noise. You can't let it get you down, because certainly it's present and it exists, and it exists on different levels. So always, with this just as an example, always keep your eyes on what's important. Keep your focus on what's important. Like what the Mahasi Sayadaw is talking about, there's no gender here, right? There's no gender in reality. If you get bogged down by these the conventional details of society, concept, you'll never be free.
I've stopped the stream for studying, so yeah, we have started anyway with the discussion. And anyone with questions can post them now in the Discord group or YouTube, and we will soon present them to the Venerable. I also have a comment about something you earlier mentioned, Bante, about how we don't take death seriously, because I've been thinking about this quite frequently the past week. And I was wondering, I mean, I kind of have an answer, but not really, to how no matter how much we try to intellectually think about death, and as Buddhists or non-Buddhists, it doesn't really frighten one in the same way that even the mundane things of the everyday life worry you, like some kind of deadline, and maybe something that's in 10 years or something, or things that are expected of you, like finding a job after school and stuff like that. Even though these things are also kind of far away, they take much more importance for many of us. And I'm trying to understand a bit better why. So maybe you can help me, Bante.
Well, one of the things that you notice, an important part of paying attention to reality, is under the heading of uncertainty, but it's a specific kind of uncertainty where unexpected things happen. So you'll be practicing and something unexpected happens. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything. And that happens once or twice. It's not a big deal. But when you start to notice that that is inherent to the nature of reality, that there is no, you can't get a handle on it. You can't make it so that life is predictable or reality is predictable. That starts to have a profound impact on the mind. And it relates to appreciation of death. Because then when you think about death, you realize, yeah, some that changes can happen. It's not intellectual. You don't intellectually think, yeah, when I die, I might go to a bad place, or it means a completely new life. It's actually visceral sense that death is like this, like I've been experiencing, only, even bigger. This experience of something that I'm not ready for is the point. So when strange things happen, you're taken off guard, you're caught off guard, and you stress and you suffer because you're not expecting it. Right? If it was something you expected, you'd be ready for it. But this is something new. What do I do? What do I do? Death is going to be like that. It's going to be scary. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to be stressful. So it's more about the fact that the meditation makes you look at things like death differently.
Thank you, Bante.
Bante, I would like to present the first question we have. Here is the question. The precepts, for the most part, I think I'm keeping them at my best. But often something happens and I am thinking, oh, this maybe can be seen as breaking one of the precepts. And until I research, decide, or ask a monk, I feel blocked. That is the main reason that is blocking me to start the at-home meditation course. What would you recommend? Just to start and ask you, and in case, stop and fix?
Well, I recommend basing and applying mindfulness to what sounds like a bit of an obsession. I'm not entirely clear what you're describing, but it sounds like you're obsessing. So it's not so much about the fact that you might be breaking the precepts, but it's the fact that you have this unavoidable concern, constant concern that you might be breaking one or another of the precepts, right? Because you have to see the precepts as incredibly simple and not really a vaguely defined entity at all. So the fact that you're concerned that you might be doing something, you're doing something that might be perceived as breaking the precepts is just a sign that you're overthinking it. You know, the precepts are pretty simple. Keep them simple. If you don't intentionally kill, you didn't break the first precept. If you don't intentionally steal, you didn't break the second precept. So that first, and I mean, unless you're addicted to alcohol and unable to stop that, I can't really think of any of the 5 precepts that you have to really see as a blocker to actually taking the at-home course. Maybe lying. Some people think in their lives that they have to lie. But you have to get that straight, that you're not going to lie. Doesn't mean you're always going to say what is the truth. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to speak just because something is the truth. Oh, I got to say that. You don't have to say it. But you can't say what is intentionally false to try and deceive someone. But really, as long as you're committed to the precepts, let's say, you don't have to worry about breaking them, because they're a training in and of themselves. For many people, it's difficult. It's just habitually. A mosquito lands on you, you kill it. Right? This becomes an ingrained habit that can take time to overcome. So as long as you're dedicated to them and applying yourself to keep them, with the understanding that they are that breaking them is a detriment to your practice, it's going to make it harder to see clearly if you're breaking the 5 precepts. That's fine. You're not expected to keep them unfailingly in the sense that if you break them, you're out of the course. If you break them, well, then you make a dedication to keeping them. But I would say if someone is drinking alcohol regularly, they shouldn't do the course. I mean, they can't stop drinking regularly. Many people can stop. They just stop cold turkey. But some people can't. Or drugs of any sort. You know, you can't do that. I think you got an issue, and you might have to go to rehab or Alcoholics Anonymous.
The next question, Bhante. How do we tell the difference between letting go and apathy in daily life? How do I make sure my mindfulness practice doesn't become an excuse for inaction?
Well, they're just words. There's not really much of a difference. In a way, you do become apathetic. I don't think it's the best way of describing it, but it's kind of like that. apathetic. Maybe it is a good word. I think you might be misunderstanding if you think that there is much of a difference. Because it seems to me that apathetic is a pretty good way of describing mindfulness. And inaction is going to be a big part of mindfulness as well. So if you think there's something wrong with either of those, that might be the problem. The real problem, I think, is when people say apathetic, they're kind of just lazy or, it's really just greed and anger that's hidden. So the greed part comes when you just really, the truth is you just want to sit around and do nothing and feel pleasure and eat and sleep and you're addicted to those things, but you're not recognizing that, and so you think you're apathetic. But an apathetic person really doesn't care what they eat. They're not attached to this food or that food or averse to this food or that food, and they're not addicted to sleep. They're not addicted to lying down. So they're perfectly fine to do many things. An enlightened person isn't driven to inaction per se, but on the other hand, there's many things that they stop doing. So they are inactive a lot of the time because they just don't see the point in doing so many things because of wisdom. Wisdom will show you that there's many things that are just pointless. And so if someone comes and says this, we gotta do this, we gotta do that, you just look at them, you see clearly that this person is a little bit insane. Because they're completely wrong. We don't have to do that. And doing that is not going to, many of the things that humans say we have to do and we have to be worried about, we have to be excited about, we have to be keen on, are not really worth it. So it absolutely leads to an increased inactivity, I would say. But again, it's not, people who talk about being apathetic are usually not apathetic. They're usually just full of greed and anger and delusion. It can be just delusion also, where they just sit around and think all day. That's another one.
Here's the next question, Bhante. Ever since I became unemployed, my mind has been overcome with sloth and torpor. What advice can you give to a layperson within and outside of formal meditation?
Well, if you're unemployed, come and do a meditation course. Maybe it's difficult to travel, but certainly do the at-home course. The best advice is always to do intensive practice under a teacher. If you can't do that, do at least daily practice and mindfulness throughout the day. I don't know if you've read our booklet, but start there and do our at-home course if you haven't done that. If you've done that, well, just keep practicing. Keep practicing, and as you mentioned about being a layperson, there's other things you can do like charity work and make sure you're keeping the precepts, and chanting you can do, other sorts of meditative activities or meditation adjacent activities that are not really meditative but something like it. Meditative in nature, go for walks. No, but specifically do good deeds that can be supportive of your practice. Think of what good deeds you can do today, like the Boy Scouts. And do a good turn every day.
The next question, Bhante. Sometimes I feel like noting isn't enough against fear. It can get overwhelming. Didn't the Buddha also get afraid when he was still a bodhisattva in the forest alone? What did he do?
He faced his fear. He wouldn't even change his posture. He said, I won't change my posture until the fear goes away. It was like a stare down. He faced it. So when you say noting isn't enough against fear, you're giving yourself away because you're actually against the fear. And mindfulness isn't about being against things. This is a misunderstanding. You're not trying to get rid of the fear. You're trying to see it clearly, and that's what you're doing. I mean, you're not get clearly, but it's showing itself. It's like right there in front of you, but you're not getting it, which is normal. I mean, this is the way of things. It's a slow realization that, yeah, the fear isn't under your control. Noting isn't going to fix it. Noting is going to show you that it isn't under your control. It's unwieldy, it's unmanageable, it's scary. Fear can be overwhelming. Learning that again and again and again, as well as learning that it actually doesn't have any power over you, that we give the emotions the power that they have over us. They only have power over us because we give it to them. But fear is not scary. Fear is just fear. It arises and it ceases. It may not cease when you want it to cease, and it may get big and uncomfortable before it goes away. But it still eventually goes away. We don't notice that it goes away, so we don't get that. We're discouraged thinking it doesn't go away. But of course it goes away. You just weren't noticing it. And that's seeing things go away is a huge part of the practice as well. You have to be diligent and vigilant and persistent. Stay with things until they go away, no matter how bad they get. I mean, it takes skill, it takes practice, but that's the idea. When you do that, you'll start to become stronger than the fear.
Here's the next question, Bhante. Could you clarify whether the teaching about not trying to change or control experience and simply observing and letting go applies specifically to meditation, or whether it should also guide how we respond to thoughts, emotions, desires, and habits in daily life? In other words, outside of meditation, is there still a place for deliberately cultivating wholesome states and intentions and abandoning unwholesome ones, as described in the early Buddhist teachings?
Well, that is the cultivation of wholesomeness and the abandoning of unwholesomeness. What you're thinking of is a little bit more worldly. When you talk about wholesome Dhammas, that's very squarely in the realm of experience, of momentary experience. But when you talk about, for example, giving to charity as a wholesome act, that's actually not, I mean, it's not part of the path. It's not what the Buddha is talking about. Because, for example, giving to charity, it may involve wholesome states. It may also involve unwholesome states. You can be proud of that. You can be worried about it. You can be clingy because you're giving something, but you really want to keep it for yourself. But if you're mindful, oh, that changes. So, I mean, I think you can see it like this, where conventionally, even the Buddha tried to control things. Conventionally. I mean, it's not, I'm probably misspeaking there. It's not quite accurate, but the Buddha did things that appeared to be very controlling. But that's all conventional. That's not what's actually happening. So, yes, in ordinary life, But you're mixing things up when you start to quote the Buddha as talking about cultivating wholesomeness and abandoning unwholesome. That's not it. That's you're conflating two different things. Most of the control that the Buddha exerted or that an arahant might exert is really just matter of course. It's not practice. It's not wholesome or unwholesome. It's just what you do in a certain situation. So you say things to your students, or you say things to your children, or you say things to your fellow monks that appear to be trying to change them, for example. But you're just saying it because it's the right thing to say. And if the person changes or doesn't change, it doesn't upset you or make you happy. Because on a phenomenological level, experiential level, you're not trying to control anything. You just say it because it's the right thing to say. This is, I think, what people don't realize is that you don't need control to be wholesome or to be good or to be pure. You just need wisdom. When you have wisdom, you do the right thing, you say the right thing, and you do and say them not because you want or you're trying to control, but because it's just the right thing to do. It just is clearly what should be done or said at that time. Now, if you're not a Buddha, you don't actually know that for sure, but an arahant has a pretty good idea. It's pretty obvious. And they just do the obvious, not even the right thing, but they do something that is pure. And it appears to be this person exerting their will on others, their students, for example, telling their students this or that. But it's pretty obvious that it's not coming from a place of trying to control. No, I think it's a big lesson. It's the lesson of non-self. And it's a big lesson that you get through mindfulness, that trying to control things, even meditation, for example, is not useful. It's not helpful. It's harmful. It's harmful. Let's put it that way. Trying to control. Dite ditamatang bhavisati. Let what is seen be just what is seen.
The next question, Bhante. When meditating, music will oftentimes be stuck in my head. I note the music, but it persists and keeps going, playing in the background as I'm saying rising and falling. How to handle this?
Yeah, so again, be clear that I note the music, but it persists. Shouldn't be, I mean, it's part of the lesson. You're not noting, expecting that will make it go away. I mean, you are, but that's a mistake. If you're thinking I will note and it won't persist because I noted, you misunderstand the point. And you're learning, and it's not a bad thing, you're learning that you were wrong. You're learning the wrongness of thinking that you can somehow control your mind or control these things to not happen, to stop. So that's the lesson. You shouldn't note rising, falling. I mean, you hear something in your mind, yeah, you really should note hearing until it goes away. And if it comes back, go back to it again. It's teaching you an important thing about music, that our addiction to music has consequences. When I first started meditating, all the music I listened to, I was a musician actually. But in my teenage years, I wasn't a real, but I was, deeply into music. So that was a tough one. Eventually it stops. Give it some years.
Here's the next question that we have, Bhante. I have a concrete plan 2 years out, leaving Mexico to study in Ireland. Meditation clarifies the steps and the wanting falls away, and I feel indifferent to whether it happens. I understand chanda isn't tanha, but I can't tell from the inside which one is present, or whether the indifference is insight or avoidance. What should I be watching in the mind to tell them apart?
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a misunderstanding. Common misunderstanding is the idea that there is some kind of thing called chanda that is apart from tanha. So you can want something or like something, but have it not be wanting or liking somehow. There is no distinction. When the Buddha uses the word chanda, he's using it as a figure of speech. But the reality of it, there is no chanda, or there's no liking, there's no wanting. There's doing because it's the right thing to do. So, and often just doing it because it's the path of least resistance. So you do things because if you didn't do them, maybe people would be upset. And so you're like, well, I can do it. I mean, it's not like it's a problem for me, for example. So you just do it because often because it's the path of least resistance. Not always. You don't always do the easiest thing, but if you don't have reason to not go with the flow, you often just go with the flow. Why not? Why would you bother? There's nothing in you as an enlightened person to bother, trying to fight against this or fight against that. So what mindfulness does is it shows you the difference between what's important and what's not important. Sare sara dasino. Ye sare sa. Sarancha sarato nyatva asarato ja asarato. Asare ja asarato. When one knows what is essential as essential and what is not essential as unessential. So you're seeing that leaving Mexico to study in Ireland is not essential. You're still going to get old, sick, and die, and going to Ireland doesn't sound like it's going to help that. So it loses any significance to the mind, which is correct, which is valid. Doesn't mean you won't do it. You just don't ascribe the same level of importance to it. It's not that important. That's a good sign, because it's not. If it's not sila, samadhi, panya, morality, concentration, or wisdom, it's not really important. Or, or the results of those things are also very important.
Here's the next question, Bhante. Could you explain the importance of celibacy? How necessary is it? You even mentioned in your booklet, will the practice stall if one does not abstain from indulging in these sensual pleasures?
So it's not hard and fast rule, but here's the idea that I would give you about the precepts. 5 precepts are absolute, meaning if you're breaking the 5 precepts, you're not going to progress. If you're committed or regularly breaking the 5 precepts, which includes adultery. So if you're committing adultery, like you're cheating on your partner behind their back without them knowing, yeah, the 5 precepts are like that. The 8 precepts, so the additional precepts of celibacy, not eating in the afternoon, or not eating outside of the morning, like eating once a day, not giving up entertainment, beautification, singing, dancing, that sort of thing, and sleeping on a simple bed, sleeping only 6 hours or less. These things do not cause your practice to stall, but they inhibit your practice. They cause it to slow down. So it's the difference between stopping and slowing down, or even going backward. Breaking the 5 precepts causes you to go backward, pull away from the practice. Breaking the 8 precepts, again, it's not really hard. It really much depends on the dedication you have to breaking the precepts. So if you're constantly breaking them or breaking them in a very extreme manner, then obviously it can be to your detriment. But generally speaking, as a general rule, they only really slow down your potential practice. If you're doing any practice at all, if you're not doing any practice, you're just adding unwholesomeness. But it's also possible to be mindful when you're doing these things. So when you're engaging in uncelibate behavior, you can also be, from time to time, mindful, which is quite insightful. I mean, it teaches you something about this thing that you're usually so blind during. I mean, engaging in sensuality is such a blind act. It's why, I mean, it's not why, but it's what allows evil to take root, and the evil that exists within certain individuals causes them to commit horrible acts in the name of sensuality, because the mind is so blind. But it's quite enlightening if you're mindful during it, because it starts to teach you the difference. I mean, there's people who are so obsessed with and guilty about their lack of celibacy, their lack of dedication. Lay people who feel guilty about engaging in sensual acts, or even engaging in gluttony, eating, and that sort of thing, or entertainment, or scrolling, or someone mentioned being on YouTube all the time. And it's not that those are not harmful, but more harmful, more immediately harmful is your attitude towards it, how you feel bad and guilty, you're hating yourself for it, that sort of thing. You have to change that. Learning to be mindful gives you a new perspective. And as what the Buddha realized, it's like, oh, the problem isn't the pleasure. The problem is the way I was looking at it. And if you pay attention, if you face the pleasure as you would face the pain, it becomes innocent. I mean, it becomes an experience, a pure experience. The pleasure part. You can experience pleasure and have a pure mind, just like you can experience pain and have a pure mind. But you will become celibate. I mean, it's not to say that you will still engage in those acts, but you start to really and truly and deeply change that about yourself, where you're just not interested in them anymore. That's the point. When you see them clearly, then you let go of them, because letting go comes from disinterest. It doesn't come from aversion. It doesn't come from hatred. It doesn't come from control, trying to fix. I was reading something about someone who was describing how successful they were at overcoming sensuality, pornography in particular, I think. And they described how they limited themselves, and they had what did they do? They were doing something else, I can't remember, but they were doing something, and they were so successful for like 30 years, and then they relapsed, which is a good example of how anything but vipassana doesn't really work. But what that means is anything but facing and learning and understanding doesn't work. You can have all the strategies you want, all the control you want. It has a time limit, and that it eventually expires. Only wisdom has no expiration date.
Bhante, here's the next question. Do you have any advice for someone who cares too much about what other people think about me? It influences almost all my thoughts, like an obsession.
If you keep being mindful, you'll see that it, among other things, are just causing you stress and suffering. You're already seeing that, just keep facing it. If you see that again and again and again, it will get weaker. This is what mindfulness shows you. It shows you how unpleasant those states are and how uncomfortable they are, how useless they are. I mean, it's just so revealing how meaningless it all is, how meaningless it is what other people think of you. But you can't just tell yourself that or try to make yourself believe that. You have to just see it. And not just see it, you see reality. Because when reality is right there in front of you, is laid out, is made clear, is understood, the idea that what someone says about you should have any significance whatsoever is just absurd. It's just wrong. So it just takes practice. Best advice, intensive practice in a meditation center under a teacher. If you can't do that, we have an at-home meditation course, which is a good second choice. But there's really no other way.
Here's the next question, Bhante. I have ADHD and Asperger's, so I am strict about rules and keep brainstorming the edge cases to make sure I keep them. I just need to know when it's just an obsession or not. So should we see that together in the course?
Well, I guess my advice would be not to fixate on labels like obsession. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Is something an obsession? Isn't it an obsession? it is what it is, and that's what you're trying to see. You're trying to see what it is, the nature of it, of all the its, including your concern that you might be obsessing or yeah, all of the worry and so on. It's fine to keep the rules. You'll see that some of them are useful. What's not useful is greed, anger, delusion, worry, fear, etc. And that's what you'll see from the Course.
The next question, Bhante. How can I overcome procrastination, such as putting off reading until tomorrow?
Well, mindfulness helps to some extent, because to some extent, or in some cases, procrastination is caused by greed, anger, delusion, and in those cases, it's a real solution. Mindfulness gives you so much strength and so much fortitude of mind, so much patience. You can do things so much easier than other people. When I learned the Patimokkha, yesterday was the Uposatha, so I had to chant. I do the chanting every 2 weeks, which means for almost an hour straight chanting something that's been memorized. It's memorized by heart. And so I had to go through months of training, of memorizing, where I would just sit and morning once, evening once, training myself to memorize. Just memorizing this 227 rules of the Buddhist monk. And the real problem wasn't the memory. I have a pretty good memory. It's one of those things that's neat, but not really, it's not profoundly beneficial. It doesn't make you a better person to have a good memory, but some people have obviously much better memories even, but having a good memory makes it possible. Just having a good memory isn't enough, though. The real problem, and the reason why I'm telling this, is that the big reason why people can't learn, why monks can't learn these rules, is not really memory. It's boredom. It's aversion. This aversion becomes so strong. It just boils up, and you just get revulsion at the idea of doing something so banal. Your whole psyche revolts against it. It's a pretty big deal. But if you can face that, if you can recognize that and say, here it comes again, and overcome that, face it until it gives up, then it's really quite simple. Learning the Patimokkha was really an interesting experience, because you realize how easy things are when you're mindful. Things that seem so impossible are only really impossible because you get discouraged, because you give up. Work is often like that. Whatever your attitude towards work is, it could be schoolwork, it could be employment, it is very much going to depend, or going to impact how well you do at it and how capable you are at doing it. I went at one point and did tree planting. This was before I was a monk. But I'd started practicing meditation, and I hadn't really been exercising even, but I went and joined this tree planting group trying to raise money to get back to Thailand. And these guys were fit. There are guys who had been doing it regularly. And so I was struggling physically, but I just plowed through mentally. And over the days, I developed strength. But really being mindful and being dedicated to being mindful made it so much easier. It was really just boom, 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 just do it. And you put up with the screaming muscles and put up with the challenges. But I was able to keep up with the more seasoned people just by sheer will, because this is what I was doing, and just by doing it mindfully, there was no protesting. So what I mean to say is that mindfulness makes a lot of things easy, and it makes it very simple to just go and do the things you know you have to do. So if you're not able to do that, it's not procrastinating isn't really the best way of looking at it. It's the aversion to it, the boredom, the craving and desire for something else. That's what's really causing the procrastination is just an observation of the outcome, but it's not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is you're reacting. And anyone who practices mindfulness, I think, should be able to verify or should be able to verify what I'm saying. That they will find everything a lot simpler, a lot easier, by themselves, much better able to just do what needs to be done.
Here's the next question, Bhante. Sometimes it happens to me in walking meditation that my body just moves my legs and I note it. However, sometimes it feels like my body doesn't have any intention to move them at all, and if I try to prompt the movement, it is stressful. What should be done in this situation?
Well, note the stress. But yeah, that's what you're seeing is reality. You're learning the non-self nature of it all. This is what leads to freedom. This will eventually lead to cessation. It will lead to nibbana. You'll experience the cessation and the subsequent peace that comes from it. I mean, if the walking just doesn't happen, you can do standing until it does. Just say standing, standing. It'll happen again. The walking will happen again. Are we still here?
Yeah, Martin has, I think, microphone issues.
Huh?
Sorry, I was muted. But we have reached the second hour, so we can conclude our session there.
All right.
I want to thank you, Bhante, as always, for your time and guidance, answering people's questions, and for sharing the Dhamma with us. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you. Much appreciation for the people who make this session possible, who do all the work behind the scenes, including our organization and board of directors, but more immediately those of you who have dedicated so much time and effort into making this run so smoothly. And much appreciation for the reading group who are dedicated enough to come out week after week and read this text to us. And me as well. I appreciate the reading that you do for all of us. Much appreciation to the people asking questions, very good questions, which are a sign of a serious intention on your part to better yourself. And that's always to be applauded. We appreciate not just you doing things for other people, but doing things for yourself is really the Buddhist way. So much appreciation for you trying to make yourself better, improve yourself, improve your lot, free yourself from suffering. This is what we want for all of you, for all of us, for all beings. So much appreciation for taking the time out of your lives to everyone watching, taking the time out of your lives to do something wholesome. And not only wholesome, but related to the Dhamma. So wholesomeness will bring you good results in a mundane realm. But anything connected with the Dhamma will bring you closer to something super mundane, something beyond the vicissitudes of life. So no matter what good things come your way from whatever wholesome things you've done, those good things have an expiry date. They eventually disappear. And unless you're somehow able to always do wholesome things, you're not always going to have good results. Sometimes you'll do unwholesome things and have bad results, hurting other people, hurting yourself. But the Dhamma leads to something that is beyond that, leads you to be independent, leads you to be free from being triggered by the vicissitudes of life. So life continues to change, good and bad, but you're no longer disturbed by it. Your happiness doesn't depend on circumstance. You have peace and happiness and freedom from suffering, no matter what you experience. So much appreciation for all of us. We should be happy about what we've done here, happy about this activity that we've taken this opportunity to do something good. So, as usual, by the power of all of the goodness that has been performed on this occasion, including the appreciation for one another, along with all the goodness that has been performed in this life and in past lives as well, along with the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. May you all be free from pain, free from sorrow, free from lamentation, free from despair, free from danger, free from calamity, free from illness, free from enmity, free from all kinds of loss and all kinds of suffering. May you all live long, healthy, happy lives with the strength to face whatever challenges come your way. May you all be dedicated to the cultivation of the Buddha's teaching for happiness in this life, happiness in the next life, and the supermundane happiness of the path, fruition, Nibbana. May you all find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
I have ended the stream. Thank you, everyone.